Marcy, can you please unmute the council chambers?
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, October 25th regular meeting of council. First of all, I would like to call to order this meeting, and I would also like to acknowledge that we are on a meeting tonight on the shared traditional lands of the on the Lekwungen speaking people, which would be the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. Everybody is in attendance except for Councillor Day. I will make a note when Councillor Day arrives. And Councillor Day has now arrived. So I'm now moving to two, approval of the agenda. This is the near term, long term, and that says committee of the whole, but it's actually council. Are there any errors, omissions, changes? Not seeing any. I will say that the agendas have been received and accepted unanimously for this evening. Moving on to, public. What's three? Three is public participation. So would like to acknowledge that we've received one written submission, which was received and circulated to council and will be amended to the agenda. No people have registered online for public participation, but we do have several people in the audience this evening. If you're here to speak to a specific thing, for example, the Fuca Performing Arts, please, you have your own spot. But if you're just here to just share general comments, I would ask that you step up to the mic, say your name, your address, and hit the little red button so that we can all hear you. And don't all rush. It doesn't look like we have any people for public participation. So that is going to move me on to Mayor's message. I have two things to say. Now, as you can probably tell, if you're watching online, we as a council are now meeting in person. We do have the ability to also have people within the gallery. And so to protect public safety and to comply with indoor meeting regulations, council is now holding a hybrid council meeting. Hybrid meetings allow for both in-person and electronic attendances by council members and the public. Anyone who is ill or experiencing possible COVID symptoms, as well as those with mobility issues, childcare needs, or other reasons that make in-person attendance impossible, can now participate in city meetings electronically. This will increase the likelihood that council will have quorum for decision-making and be able to conduct city business. Here are the ways that you, as a resident, can participate. In person, up to 25 members of the public will be permitted into the council chamber on a first come, first served basis until capacity is met. Masks are mandatory. Attendees will be required to sign in for contact tracing and remain seated during the meeting. Electronically, to participate via telephone or computer, please pre-register by noon of the day of the meeting by contacting our corporate services. Written submissions. Submissions can be provided to corporate services at colwood.ca or by mail or drop off at City Hall until noon of the day of the meeting and will be circulated to the mayor and council and will be added to the agenda after the meeting. Council meetings will continue to be streamed live at colwood.ca/meetings. Our goal is to continue to offer a range of safe and accessible participation options that encourage attendance at city meetings. In addition to that, I have one other real quick note. Excuse me. Last week, myself and members of the Colwood Parks team joined the Victoria Horticulture Society President Mike McHugh and others to plant a new tree at Seashell Park. The tree is one of the Society's 100 trees in the CRD to commemorate their 100th anniversary. It will be complementing the natural beauty of the park by offering a burst of color and a shady rest for visitors for many years to come. Since 1921, the Victoria Horticultural Society, I'm struggling with that word today, has been providing hands-on information about gardening successfully in Victoria with the motto, share what you know, show what you grow. And you can visit them on their website. I was also very proud because Colwood was actually #1 tree of the 100. So it was very nice to have them come on board and do that with us. So thank you very much to them. Moving on to 5, which is adoption and the receipt of minutes. This is for the regular council meeting minutes of October 12th. I get a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. May I look at, can I still just ask for those in opposition, or do you want me to do in favor and in opposition? Okay, so those in opposition, please raise your hands. Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to presentations. This is 6.1, the Wanda Fuca Performing Arts Center Society. Ms. Collington. Could you use your mic and say it for the record, please?
Sorry, I'm excusing myself because of a conflict.
Great, thank you. So there is a conflict of interest. You know. How would you like me to identify the conflict? I don't know what that officially is considered.
It's actually up to Councillor Baxter.
Oh.
I'm related to the person who's going to make the presentation.
Say it.
I'm related to the person who's going to make the presentation.
Great, thank you. And before I begin, Councillor Day.
Sorry, just when this is a conflict that Councillor Baxter has already declared. So my understanding, and this is just for clarity for all of us, is that once you've declared a conflict and the matter comes up again, all you have to say is your previously declared conflict. So it should be recorded in the minutes the first time, and then we should all know, I think, afterwards, but I'm open to direction. That's just my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Collington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I would ask if Amanda can put the presentation up on screen. I'm assuming I'm going to be able to see it up there. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Can we have the version that doesn't show what's coming next? I'd hate to spoil the surprise. There you go. Technology. Okay, let's work with that, and we may be able to get a more complete version. So let me start by saying it is wonderful to be here live in council chambers and see your faces as opposed to just over Zoom. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope that by the end of this presentation you will be impressed at the amount of momentum that this project has gained since we last met, and will understand that our group has taken this as far as we can without clear support from council. So let me raise the curtain and begin our update. Can you go back to the update slide? There you go. So it's been a long time since we've given you a formal update. It was back in June of last year. So we thought that you might want to hear about the work that we've been doing. So as you know, we want to work with the city to build a very community-focused arts and culture centre. So this would be more than just a theatre, although that would very much be a feature piece. Think of it as a place where kids can take music or dance or art lessons, where residents from around the region and from Colwood can take in live performances without having to travel downtown, where students can learn a full range of skills from sound and lighting to producing online events that kind of echo around the world. somewhere that's going to create pride in Colwood and provide a home for arts and culture, something that's missing from Colwood at this moment in time. And I also want to remind you that the city has been a supporter of this project for many, many years, including a substantial investment in the work done by theatre consultant Rick Schick, which still continues to underpin our work. And that last time we met, you directed us to work with staff to develop an MOU for potential use of the park and ride site. I also hope you remember at our last presentation, it was accompanied by almost 100 letters of support, including from our MLA and MP, school district, Royal Roads, Chamber of Commerce, West Shore Parks and Rec, and many, many art groups and individuals who continue to support us in making this a reality. Next slide, please, Amanda. Should be one that says updates on it. That's slide number 3. There we go. So this is just a quick visual to say we have been working on a whole bunch of different fronts, and I will work my way through those through this presentation. Next slide, please. So you're probably all aware that CRD undertook an extensive review of what they called the Performing Arts Facilities ecosystem last year. So this is the so-called Stage 1 report. Our society was a very active participant in these discussions, and you will see specific reference to this in the final report. There is a lot of information in there, but 2 key findings that I want to share with you today. One is that groups are looking for performance space that is available when they need it, it's adequate to their needs, it's accessible for the performance and audiences of all abilities, and at a rate that is affordable to that group. The specific needs, of course, vary from group to group. Everybody needs something a little bit different, but it's clear that we need space that meets local needs, especially for theatres in the 300 to 500 seat range. They're very scarce and in demand region-wide. And if you look at the map on the right-hand side, what you'll see is that performance spaces in the West Shore. So this map is showing theatre spaces, so not including church spaces, school, etc. The gap on the West Shore is very painfully obvious. One result of this Stage 1 study is that the CRD are looking to the possibility of a regional performing arts facilities service that would provide shared funding both for the construction and for the operation of regional facilities. And the chair of the CRD has made it very clear that the proposed Colwood facility would be categorized as a regional facility. So Councillor Parkinson, you asked in the past how other municipalities would contribute to our project. This may be one way. Next, please. So one of the things that we've been doing is we created a project advisory committee. So leaders from the West Shore interests, including arts groups, the school district, IACD, Royal Roads, West Shore Parks and Rec. And one of the first tasks we asked for their input on was development of a survey that went out to about 64 different expressed interest in our proposed arts centre to see how they were faring during COVID and if it had changed their plans in any way. So I have to tell you that there have been many significant struggles, but the arts groups are astonishingly resilient and most plan to come bouncing back as soon as they're able, even though it may take a year or 2 yet. Next slide, please. So if you look at the bar along the top, we had about 28 responses to the survey and a couple of questions that we asked. So one is, what is important for you when selecting space? And if you look at the red and the orange, it shows those things that are important or essential. And you can see that all of these factors rate very highly. We also asked, how easy is it for you to book suitable space on the West Shore? And the dark blue shows not so easy and the green shows not at all easy. So at least half of the groups identified multiple challenges in booking space. Next slide, please. So like everybody else, we've been impacted by COVID. We went to the online Zoom meetings. We had less ability to network with our partners. But as Machiavelli says, never waste the opportunity offered by a good crisis. So we have been paying attention to what has changed, what is continuing to change in performing arts venues and needs. So some of the things that will influence our decisions going forward, need more attention in post-COVID design, things like flexible spaces, the ability to live stream events, really good state-of-the-art HVAC and ventilation systems, and also that kind of net zero sustainability design is really important. Next slide, please. We have been continuing to learn as much as we can. We had help from a master's students at Royal Road University, Wei Gang Gu, who researched a variety of building sustainability options for us to consider. And we also worked with the University of Indiana student, Ashri Gurungunti, to study financial models and ways that we can create a financially self-sustaining model for our project. Next slide, please. We are also hugely fortunate to have support from Royal Roads University, and a huge shout out to Dr. Brian White, who's behind me. He's the program head of RRU's Global Tourism Management Program. And Giovanni Malcolm, who brings years of experience as the Operations and Development Manager at Darragh Castle. So Brian and Gio worked together and produced an excellent and very thoughtful report looking at the importance of art centres to the social well-being of the community, recommended operating and government structures, partnership models that would suit this type of organisation. He presented his final report to us back in May, and Mayor Martin and the CIO were able to join us for that presentation. Looking ahead, we are hoping to embark on a second collaboration, probably a collaboration with Dr. Carolyn Rico Monroe, and her MBA students at Royal Roads University to assist us with more detailed business plans, and also hoping to embark on a second collaboration with Dr. White, looking at the pros and cons of using a social enterprise model to assist in operations management. Next slide, please. So what we're planning, of course, has been done by lots of other people before us. So we've taken the time to visit and learn from many other facilities, and this shows just some of them. And that's helped to provide us detailed information that to guide our thinking. So the images that you see in here were taken from a recent visit to the Chilliwack Arts and Culture Centre. Next slide, please. So clearly, our group is not going to take on a project of this scope without significant help from a diversity of professionals. So we have been involved, we continue to be involved in numerous discussions to identify the appropriate skill sets we're going to need and potential providers of those skill sets. As for example, we know we'll need to raise a very significant amount of money from both senior government sources and private donations. So we need professional help to get there. So in preparation, we have interviewed 3 different professional fundraising companies so that we're well set to do this work. All of them feel that it will probably take between 18 months and 2 years to raise the kind of funds that we're talking about, but they all feel that it's feasible. So that's very encouraging. Next slide, please. It also goes without saying, we are not a professional development company, and that we will need to be building this project in conjunction with the right developer who's going to bring passion and heart to this project, as well as deep experience and deep pockets. So to this end, we've been having some very high-level preliminary discussions with developers and continue to identify new possibilities. We are also talking to a highly experienced arts and culture advisor who may be in a position to work with us to drive this project forward. Next slide, please. We continue to keep both the MLA and MP briefed, and both continue to be very supportive. On Minister Dean's encouragement, we presented to the Provincial Budget 2022 Committee and gave them a heads up that we would be coming in front of them with a significant funding request coming up. MP Garrison's office has been providing us help in assisting sourcing federal grants. But, and it is an important but, our group cannot apply for funding unless we have lease on the land. So we need some kind of ownership in there. Next slide, please. So bringing it close to home, it was wonderful seeing all of you at the various arts and cultures events that took place in Colwood this year. So Music in the Park, shout out to Sandra Russell, wherever she is, was a huge success in the first year, attended by, as you know, a large number of people of all ages, and including some dinosaurs, which the Mayor and Councillor Logan can attest to. It was fabulous. There were so many kids and their families enjoying the Kaleidoscope theatre presentations that took place at City Hall. Huge kudos to the Arts and Culture Society Colwood for the work they've been doing, putting on events like the Teacher Meester Fall Art Show, presentations by Four Seasons Musical Theatre, and to everybody for working together on the Natsumath gathering on National Truth and Reconciliation Day. So I think it really gave us an understanding of how much desire there is and appreciation there is for performances in this community, and that we need space to ensure that we can put on fabulous events year round and not just when the sun is shining. Next slide, please. So we have, of course, spent considerable time developing a draft memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, that can guide our approach. And I want to give a huge shout out to Jeffrey Simpson of Kazon CRA Solutions for the huge amount of work he put into this. Jeff is no longer working with us on this project, but did help to really move our thinking forward. So we look forward to talking to council about this MOU and this or other best options to move this project forward. I want to be clear that we have worked incredibly hard to bring this project to a place where it is ready to move forward quickly, but we need clear support from the city, and soon, because we're seeing opportunities slip through our fingers. The community wants this, the community needs this. Remember all those letters of support, but we cannot take it further forward without you. So we are hoping this is the time for council to step up and say, yes, we support making Colwood a complete community by providing spaces for kids and adults to participate in the arts, just as they do in the many sports and recreational opportunities in our region. And final slide. Thank you. Thank you for the time to do the presentation. I hope it's helped to give you at least a sense of some of the work that we've been doing. And I would, of course, be pleased to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Council, I will give an opportunity to ask any questions on the presentation. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Just a quick question here, Judith. The money you have to raise, what kind of money are we talking about? Just rough order of magnitude, and what portion of that is private, and what portion are you expecting to be government?
Great question, and it depends a little bit on the final financial model that we settle on. But we're looking at the Arts Centre portion per se probably being in the kind of 30 plus range. And the thinking is that we're probably raising, you know, one third from grants, from donations, and perhaps for a mortgage or other form of funding.
And just to follow up on that one, so have you actually started the private fundraising at all? Set up a trust account?
We find ourselves in a position where it's very hard. We're in a place where it's very hard to do fundraising. We are a lovely group of people with a good idea, but until we have some actual kind of concrete piece of land, a project to work with, it's very hard to do any significant fundraising. So that really is one of those pieces we're bumping up against, and that we need that clear signal of support from the city in order to move forward. With something like the MOU in place, that would really create that opportunity.
Yeah,
begin the fundraising.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. And just to clarify your answer to Councillor Kobayashi, that's 30 million that you're looking to raise? Okay, based on a kind of a.
I may have said that wrong, didn't I?
I just said in the order of 30s, but you didn't say what denomination. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And the CRD interest through their look at the performing arts and the 4 pillars, is that something that they're interested in participating financially with the program that's being considered?
So as Mayor Martin knows well, because he participates in this group, so there is this, through the CRD, there is now this Regional Performing Arts Facilities Committee. There is work in progress to see if they can actually develop this into a service. And if that service were to exist, it would provide funding for both construction and operation. Backing into your previous question, the first part of your question, something that became really clear through the CRD work. One of the pieces that is really missing is accessible art space, both for performance and audiences. Excuse me. So we've been reaching out through IATI and want to really see at how we do an excellent job in this facility of making it accessible. Because it would really kind of create a great niche for us to be part of.
Mhm. And you also mentioned that you need, before you can start creating a trust and soliciting money from the community who want to support this, you need to get a lease or something concrete in place so that you have a home for what you're raising funding for. Would that lease be something that you're able to put money towards, if not immediately, perhaps later in the relationship?
So what we've been told by both federal and provincial granting agencies is that we need a lease before we could apply for that senior government funding. We are a registered charity. If anybody has some spare cash lying around and would love to contribute to our organization, we would be absolutely delighted to accept it at any time. And so in terms of what we're thinking about in terms of a long-term lease is something that would be a very small amount of money. But conversations can be had.
Excellent. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you so much, Judith. Help me out a little because I don't recall, but where do our other West Shore communities fit in? Have you garnered support from Langford, View Royal?
I think
Chosen Highlands?
They fit in all over the place. So, you heard me respond to this notion of if we can participate in the CRD service, that really provides an opportunity for the funding for this to come from more than just Colwood residents. So that's a real opportunity. Certainly in terms of, you've seen me come before you looking for grant and aid support, certainly more than once, and we've been doing the same with the other municipalities. So View Royal, Highlands, and Chosen have also contributed small amounts over the years.
Where do they fit in with what it is you're trying to achieve, though? I mean, do we have support from View Royal and Langford Council?
From View Royal, yes. We have not had support from Langford Council at this moment in time.
And I'm not up to speed on sort of where their theater process was at. There was some talk about a theater over.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. So
There was a theater that was proposed in Langford, and I just don't know, is that still on the books or is that fallen off? Or?
As far as I know, it's still on the books, and it's an excellent question. Thank you, Councillor Jansen, because I think people worry that all of a sudden we're talking about two theatres on the West Shore. But those of you who play hockey, and I know there's more than one of you, that we don't have just one hockey arena. Right. We have multiple because it's that kind of demand. What we're looking at building is something smaller, community focused, so in the kind of 350 seat range for the theatre. That space that community groups can use. So, if you're a group and you can fill a couple of hundred seats, that looks great in a 350 seat theatre. Looks absolutely terrible in a 1,200 seat theatre. And besides which, the community groups can't afford the kind of cost for that kind of large space. Mm. So what Langford is looking at building is, as I understand it, is something much larger, clearly geared at sort of, more sort of professional, bigger performances. And so it's a wonderful collaboration. Mm-hmm. So, you've got somebody coming up through the system, they kind of, they learn the ropes, they're involved in amateur performance, and maybe they go on to do something more professional, and that's taking place in the Langford Theatre. They feed each other. There are other possibilities that, folks who are looking to do a show in the Langford Theatre might not want to afford paying for that kind of space to do the rehearsals. So maybe they use our space to do some of their rehearsals. So if we do it right, they're complementary.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. I'm not seeing anybody else. Thank you so much, Judith. I very much appreciate the presentation. Council, just as a quick update for you, just so you understand what's happening at the CRD. So there's basically two committees. There's a facility committee and also an operations committee. Last month, the CRD was looking at getting all CRD municipalities to join those two organizations. They were going to use the alternative approval process to get in. So it was basically everybody was in unless you got 10% of the entire Greater Victoria to say that shouldn't work. The board voted that down. I was quite vocal that I didn't approve or agree with the alternative approval process. So the CRD will be coming to this committee or this council at one point to ask that we join. Right now there's 9 out of 13 municipalities that belong to that organization. And if we were to look to other municipalities for funding, we need to be part of that organization. If we don't wish to have other municipalities a part of that, then we can easily go without and not join that organization. So that will be a decision point at some point in the future for this council, but not right now. So I'm going to move on to 7. Oh, thank you. And I'm going to pause. Actually, I see a light up. Councillor Parkinson, or sorry, Councillor Dave and Parkinson.
Okay, I just had a question because I asked the presenter questions, but part of the presentation is about having spent considerable amount of time working with staff. And I'm just wondering if we're anticipating a report from staff about the MOU at all, or
Sure.
because I'm trying to figure out chicken or egg.
I can get to that answer. But before I do, Councillor Parkinson, are you also going to be asking questions about this? Because I'm going to have to ask Councillor Baxter to leave. I feel comfortable answering Councillor Day's question with him in the room, but otherwise we're going to need to get him out again. Mr. Earl, could you just answer Councillor Day's question around the MOU?
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff have been meeting with the society as recently as this morning. We anticipate coming to council in the next 30 days, or we anticipate the society will be coming to council in the next 30 days to paint out options for moving forward, much as they were described today, and which approaches would best fit with council's expectations.
Perfect, thank you.
My apologies. I was hoping to get to you before he got in the room too fast. Okay, so I am going to jump now to 7.1, which is the council procedural bylaw for 2021. Council, I'm going to ask if you are electronic to please go to your committee of the whole meeting and pull out the actual report, because I am going to be pointing to certain sections that councillors have said that they would wish to discuss. I'm going to be facilitating this because I wish for us to move this through quickly. I don't wish to spend hours doing this. So at the council meeting held on October 12th, council considered and made changes to the draft council procedural bylaw 1890. Council deferred consideration of the bylaw to tonight to allow further discussion. The briefings that have been provided is addressing concerns and questions of council and to facilitate discussion. I would like to ask council if I can go through the items that were discussed one at a time, and I will ask that staff please put up each area of discussion, including possible motions if council so chooses to make changes to the draft bylaw prior to giving reading later in the agenda. So council, this is what's going to happen, just so that there's no confusion. I am going to bring up the first point that somebody wanted to talk about. We'll discuss it. I'll call the question once I have a motion. If that motion passes, it becomes part of the main motion, just automatically, so that when we get to the end and we approve it, everything that we're approving as I go through these 8 or 9 things are just going to get fed into the main motion. All right. Is that clear to everybody? Councillor Day?
I just, it's kind of difficult for me at least, because by bringing up the committee of the whole report, tonight's agenda that in all the comments that I prepared are in my other agenda. So it does make it difficult for me to move it as quickly as you want to move it, simply because in
Well,
order to do that, I'm bouncing between two agenda packages.
okay, so Councillor Day, what my plan is I'm actually going to be facilitating it. So whatever councillors have sent in correspondence, I have them. And so, for example, the first one would be in regards to rules of conduct and debate. That's section 25. And I will say that somebody asked that to insert into section 25A, in advance of a motion being put forward, an opportunity for discussion and questions will also be provided. What I was hoping to do was have people have access to be able to get to section 25. So I'm not sure. I mean,
Isn't that in the bylaw that's attached to our agenda?
Is it attached into the bylaw? Is it? Then we can refer to it there. I'm just trying to get people to go to that section. So how staff, tell me, how is it easy for this council to find the sections when I say, okay, now we're dealing with section 25, now we're dealing with section 14. How is council going to find those sections quickly?
Can I answer?
Yes.
Thank you. The easiest way would probably be to look at the briefing, which the bylaw is attached to the briefing that's attached to the agenda, and not look back to the other information. I would just go to that one, and then you can go through each item as is listed.
I'm sorry, where's that?
The briefing, it's at the bottom on your agendas. So if you go
on our
to-
agenda for
sorry.
tonight, the briefing under.
Are we talking about staff report? So we're talking
7.1.
page 31.
Page.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So the first point that I have is, as I said, section 25. This was in advance of a motion being put forward, an opportunity for discussion and questions will be provided. Does somebody wish to move that? Councillor Day. Councillor Day has moved that motion. Do I have a seconder to that motion? I'm actually feeling like, oh, thank you. Councillor Kobayashi is seconded, I think. Thank you. Councillor Day, do you wish to comment? I'm sorry, I gotta shift. How do I shift these two? There we go. No, he's not on.
Okay, so I can't actually see what's on the screen there in front of us, but oh, there we go. That's better. Okay, great. Thank you.
Nothing. You don't. Okay, okay, great. Councillor Baxter.
We're looking at the briefing, right?
Correct.
And the first item in the briefing is public participation, section 24. But we're talking about section 25, which I can't actually find.
You are correct that in the my notes do not match in the briefing. So yeah, let's go to. We'll come back to that. Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair to Michael Baxter. Just so you know, the reason why it is in that order is because we had a couple more points that were brought to our attention that we're addressing first. So there's 2 items coming first before we hit the items on the briefing that we're bringing forward. And this is one of them.
Okay,
Since the time that the agenda package went out.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other Councillor Parkinson?
I like inserting B. I don't know if that's the motion that's on
It
the
is.
table. Okay, well then I will support that. I think let's have a chance to chat before we get into the more formality of a motion being on the
Okay.
table.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? I will say I will about being opposed to this. And the reason I'm opposing it is because usually what's happening is an item has come to committee of the whole. There's been a thorough discussion at committee, and I don't support the idea of hearing the argument twice. And so I would like to have a motion on the floor, and then discussion can happen at the council level. Now, this isn't about committee, this is just council. Am I correct? Correct. So hence the reason why I would not be supporting this motion. Councillor Day.
Just a quick opportunity to try to get you to come around to my point of view on it. Not absolutely everything that comes to council also goes to committee of the whole. So if it says in our procedure bylaw that we have to have a motion first, it doesn't allow for clarification. I think we all want our meetings to go quickly and smoothly as possible, but I don't want to be put in a position where I have to move something that I'm unclear on.
All right. Would you be open to then saying in advance of a motion being put forward, an opportunity to discuss the questions be provided if it has not been discussed at a previous council or a committee meeting?
Your worship, if I may,
You may.
subject to the correction of the corporate officer, I believe section 25 applies to all meetings, both committee.
Oh, it does. Okay. Well,
And
then I need
council.
to support it if it's all meetings. Okay. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other discussion. I'll call the question. Are those in opposition? Councillor Jansen opposes. So that motion moves forward into the main motion. The second one, again, this is before, excuse me, I'm just checking to make sure. No. So Marcy, I have in the notes that you've given me, the council procedural bylaw public participation section 24. That's the second point. But you said there were 2 points that needed to get addressed before I went to this?
Sorry, this is the second point that
But-
we are addressing right here. There's two. To do
Okay,
with the
I'll
procedure
I'll
bylaw.
just read off the paper.
Thank
So council, this is the second one, public participation section 24. That public participation must be related to items on the agenda. Option 1 is that the proposed wording in the draft bylaw that public participation must be related to items on the agenda remain, or 2, the public participation be an opportunity to present any concerns and ask any types of questions to council. Councillor Day.
Sorry, I pushed my button too soon. I should have let you finish it. I didn't mean to do it that way. I would like to move that public participation be an opportunity to present any concerns or ask questions of council. And my reason for making that motion, I will make if someone wishes to second that.
Oh,
with
yeah,
me.
thank you. Thank you. Moved by, seconded by Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you. So my reason for that is that when I first attended council before I was ever elected, we did have the rule that public participation had to be related to items that were on the agenda, and it created a great deal of confusion for members of the public, and people felt very frustrated. So it was a considerable effort by myself and others to make sure that when the public wants to communicate to council, it's always the right time, not always the wrong time, because it's very difficult to be on the other side of the podium. And I want to make sure that we're being as open and transparent as possible. There may be occasions when that public participation needs to be limited due to numbers or length of agenda and other things, but I want us to try to make that the exception, not the rule.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson, then Jansen.
Thank you, Worship. I support this. I'd like the idea of people having the chance to come to vent to council if that's their wish. This is the place to do it. That's what we signed up for better or for worse. I do question whether we should include the end of that or ask questions of council, because while I think, I'm happy to hear what people say, I don't think we want to get into a question and answer session or we could be here for weeks at a time. So that's a concern I have.
Thank you. Through, I think that's a good question that Councillor Parkinson's asked. Normally, it's my understanding that we don't answer questions. So I guess they can ask the question, they just can't get an answer. So they're allowed to ask questions. So we just need to, yeah, okay. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to be speaking against this motion and voting against it. I just, in 3 years plus in doing this, I'm just not aware of a situation where someone has not been able to get a hold of us or express themselves in whatever manner they seem to be able to get a hold of me quite routinely, whether it be phone messages or emails, or even I've had, I think, 2 or 3 handwritten letters, which I do appreciate. So I believe that by doing this, we'll perhaps be better able to speak to the items. If people are speaking to the items at hand, we'll be better educated, better prepared, as will staff, as opposed to random questions that nobody was anticipating or expecting. And I think this will make the meetings go that much better. And I'm not fearful that we're somehow stifling or inhibiting the public. It seems that people of all ages, young, old, and otherwise, are finding ways to get a hold of me in this day and age. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. The Councillor Baxter, Mayor Martin, and Councillor Jansen, the motion passes. Excuse me, sorry, I turned off my mic. So we're at 2. Colwood residents be provided first opportunity during public participation, section 24II. I'm assuming that's 2 or, oh, where are we? To allow flexibility. Yeah. To allow flexibility, where's? I'm on this one now. Okay, to allow flexibility. Okay. Well, this one, the public participation be related. No, that. Sorry. So I'm sorry. I'm on page 32. Can somebody please go to page 32 and tell me, am I on 2? Colwood residents be provided first opportunity during public participation, or am I somewhere else? Or do I not have the proper agenda? Well, I'm not sure how I jumped over one, because one is the public participation be related to items in the agenda, and we just discussed that.
Your Worship,
Yes.
I'm operating from the agenda notes version, so my pagination is certainly different from yours. But the agenda notes version, number 2, Colwood residents be provided the first opportunity during public participation.
Right. That's where I am. And we're on screen now. All right. No, that's fine. All right. Previous bylaws have stated persons wishing to address council during the public participation must either be residents of Colwood or non-residential property owners unless otherwise approved. The draft bylaw has removed this requirement. The requirement that public participation extends be postponed until after bylaw sections has been also removed. This change allows speakers to address council and not have to wait until the end of the business to address. Council has always appreciated anyone who has taken the time to address council or may be impacted by council decisions. There are 2 options: that no changes be made to the draft bylaw related to public participation residency requirements, or that the draft council procedural bylaw number 1890-2021 item 24II be amended as following. Name and street address must be provided to confirm residency or property ownership. Colwood residents and or property owners will be provided first opportunity to speak. Councillor Day.
I'll move that number 2, that Colwood property owners and residents be offered first opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition to the motion? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 3, motions prior to debate, section 16A. This section applies to committees and commissions. It is preferable that council has fulsome discussion prior to moving a motion once a motion is presented. A member may speak to a motion twice for a maximum of 5 minutes each time unless more opportunities to speak are granted by unanimous consent. The options are that no changes be made to the draft bylaw, that the draft council procedural bylaw number 1890-2021, item 16A be amended to remove any time limits related to motions in the following sections. And A, that a member may speak to a motion twice for a maximum of 5 minutes each time unless more opportunities to speak are granted by unanimous consent. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll move the item number 2A, which is the 5 minute ×2 time limit. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Day. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Councillor Parkinson opposes. Moving on to 4. This is a withdrawal of withdraw a motion. This is section 28E. Only if made by the original mover and with the consent of the seconder. Background. As per Robert's rules, the maker of a motion may withdraw their motion anytime before or after it is seconded with the consent of the seconder. At any time prior to voting on the motion, the seconder may withdraw their second at any time before the vote. And so that the motions that are available, that obviously 1 is no change, or 2, that the draft council procedural bylaw number 1890-2021, item 16A. That's the last one.
That's the last one. I'm just having a hard time following where you're at.
Well, I'm on page 33 of my agenda, which was, no, I'm on number 4. Page 33. Oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't help you. Of the report, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
Excuse me, Mayor Martin.
Yeah.
I don't think that there was an option put forward. I think there was just an explanation for that one, for to withdraw a motion. So I think that we were looking for direction if there was any changes that were required.
Okay. So you're looking for direction on withdrawal of a motion on section 28.
Yes, so we've provided some background based on Robert's Rules of Order, just to give some explanation based on a question that we were asked from councillors.
Well, so can the councillor who asked this question maybe enlighten us to why? Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. I didn't make this, but I understand it. And a mover should be able to withdraw their motion. That's fairly standard under Robert's rules. And I agree with the wording that with the consent of the seconder. So I'm in favor of this amendment. Amanda, can you flush out the wording on that?
Okay, so this is what is currently it's already in the draft bylaw. So we don't need to make any amendments.
So why are we talking about it then?
Your worship,
No, like, yeah,
for 4, 5,
yes,
6, 7, no options were presented. We administration received some questioning from members of council, and we have provided information in this report in order to try to provide an understanding to those asking the questions why the draft bylaw was written as it was. And so if you're supportive of 5, as you see it there, no change to the draft bylaw is required. Sorry, 4, as you see it there, no change to the draft bylaw is required. The same with 5, the same with 6, the same with 7.
So I would like to withdraw my motion.
Thank you. All right. Then I'm going to move on, unless somebody wishes to discuss that withdrawal of a motion, to 5, tabling of the motion. Again, the background's there. I'm not sure who asked the question about tabling a motion, but I'm hoping the person who did has the information they need, or I will pause for a moment just to allow people. No? We're good? We're good? Okay, 5, we're good. Let's go to 6, which is notice of motion, section 34. This is 7 days notice. Is there any discussion or comments? No. Okay, great. This is moving along. I like this. 7. Oh, yeah, sorry. We were moving along. Go ahead, Councillor Jansen.
So I am in favor of this wording, but I just wonder, and perhaps corporate services or the chief administrator can speak to it. Does this in any way inhibit a motion that evolves during a meeting, kind of in situ?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Okay. That's 6. So we're now going to 7, public hearing, section 36. Did anybody have any, there is the background there. Did anybody have any discussions or anything? Just pausing a moment. Not hearing any. Okay, 8 seems to have options. Am I correct? Great. This is delegations. All right, I'm going to go through this one. Background. Delegations are given more time than during public participation. They are defined as a person or group on behalf of the organization or association. Any materials that they may wish to show either by PowerPoint or written are to be provided 10 days in advance of the meeting to ensure the material is included. Can I confirm, is that 10 working days or is that 10 days?
10 days prior to the council
Just 10
meeting.
days. Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Having the material provided in advance gives notice to council members and the public what is going on to be discussed at the meeting and may encourage additional attendance. Applications and proponents are required to be in attendance for specific items on the agenda. They are not in attendance as public participation or as a delegation. They usually provide a large amount of in-depth technical information that needs to be provided to ensure the council has the information required to make and informed decisions. The options are 1, that no changes be made. 2, that the draft council procedural bylaw be amended as following. E, delegations will be provided blank minutes to address council with blank time minutes allocated for discussion. Speaking times may be extended for duration, as determined by a majority of council present through the resolution. Before I look for a motion from council, are we looking to fill in those 2 times? Do we want those 2 times in the motion, or do we want to leave those blank?
Sorry, if a member of council is interested in making a change to the draft bylaw,
Yes.
then we need times in both of those insert time sections added as part of that motion.
Great, thank you. So if you're moving that motion, please insert times as well. Councillor Day.
Oh, I also see Marcy's hand, so I
Marcy.
would,
Marcy.
Sorry, I just wanted to let you know the way it's currently put into the bylaw is 5 minutes for presentation with 5 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
and okay, so I am proposing that we provide 10 minutes because I don't think I've seen a 5-minute presentation yet. And 5 minutes for questions. And both of those could be altered based on the agenda that's in front of us. But let's start closer to what we know will actually happen, is my theory behind all that.
So 10 and 5.
10 and 5.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parkinson, then Jansen. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It looks like it's Councillor Jansen, then Parkinson.
I'm sorry, Stuart. So I like what our council member has proposed. I do, as I recall, I do recall that we had some discussion around whether an individual could make a presentation, and I see here it specifies on behalf of an organization or a group. And can we get some clarity on that? If a resident that doesn't represent any particular group but wants to present something to us, I can't think of a circumstance if that is somehow inhibited with this particular wording or not.
Thank you through the chair. If a member of the public wanted to come as a delegation and they went through the proper process, we would not exclude them from that process. We would allow them to.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Oh, oh, sorry, did I not have a seconder? Thank you. If I didn't, it's Councillor Kobayashi's the seconder to that motion. Thank you, Doug.
I just have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, that the question sparked a question in my mind, because I think it's really important that we do answer that question. Because if somebody, say, was needing, I don't know, some change for a house that they're building, for example, and they wanted to show you photographs why, and they made that application. That's a reason that we normally would allow, and they don't, you know, represent an organization. They're representing one house in Colwood. So I just want to make sure, do we need that clarified in the bylaw? Is there any reason why we would need it?
I don't necessarily think we need it clarified. It allows a little bit more flexibility. Staff would encourage somebody who wanted to present to council that would think that they would go longer than the time permitted through public participation to go through the delegation format. We've encouraged that in the past. The limiter with a delegation is that they have to have their information prepared and ahead of time so we can have it out in the agenda package.
Great. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to electronic meeting policy. And this is regarding one video off. If a member is no longer visible or turns off their video at any time during the meeting, they will be considered absent from the meeting, potentially resulting in a loss of a quorum. So we do have two options here, that no changes. Now, can I just clarify with staff, is that what's presently written? So like, do I need to make that change? Or like, it looks like I do.
Sorry, yes, in the current policy, number 8 is in there as written. The option is either to leave it in there or to remove option 8.
Which is, so the option is if a member is no longer visible or turns off their video at any time during the meeting, they will be considered absent from the meeting, potentially resulting in a loss of quorum. So I'm just confirming, presently, if somebody turns off their camera, they're still there? They're still considered part of the meeting?
So one thing we've noticed with electronic meeting processes is we've had some people that have lost video feed, but they're still there with audio. So as long as they can be either seen or heard, they're considered in attendance. The point when this was getting written was the fact if somebody completely exits the meeting and is not considered there, either electronically or by audio.
So using the CRD as an example, the CRD presently requires that you have your video on when you are voting, but you don't need to have it when there's presentations or delegations going on. And that it's just that when there's a vote, if your video is not on, you are not considered there. That would seem a little more appropriate for me versus that if somebody just happens to lose their video feed or that. So if I was to move a motion, it would be considered absent. If a meeting is no longer visible, it turns off their video at any time. I guess what I would suggest to council, I won't make the motion, but I would suggest that we drop at any time to during a vote. But who's first? Councillor Jansen, then Dave.
I think you explained it well, Your Worship. I think, we accept members of the public by telephone. And if someone chooses to listen audio only during a specific portion, I don't think that's detrimental. I do believe there is value in having the video activated during a vote. At least then they can raise their hand or wave or give some kind of physical cue that they're in support or opposed. So I'm happy to frame something, it would be along those lines that that we rephrase it, that they don't have to be visible through the entirety, but they should be visible. Video should be activated during a vote.
Okay. Is that enough for you, Marcy? Or do you need it wordsmith? That's enough? Okay, do I have a seconder to that? Before, Councillor Baxter seconds it. So I will then go to discussion. I've got Councillor Day, then Kobayashi.
So I brought this up the last time, and I think it's particularly problematic because we're all very familiar with the COVID reasons for doing electronic meetings, but there are lots of other reasons to have to join electronically, or, which is, I would include telephone in electronic. Because if there's a major disaster and we can't convene at City Hall, that is the original reason why we allowed telephone participation in a council meeting, was to ensure that the city would be able to carry on business pretty much no matter what. And my experience during COVID has been that I live in an area that has really bad Wi-Fi and really bad internet. So quite often it's important for me, in order to be able to hear the meeting, to turn my video off. So I think it would be better for the bylaw to be silent and for us to verify that people are hearing you and participating if the situation warrants it, rather than trying to write into the bylaw every possible scenario. I think we need to confirm that people are still present. If you can't see them, then can you unmute and tell us that you can hear us, or some other means? But putting it in the bylaw, I think, is more prescriptive than necessary, because we're all going to want to be here in person if we can. And then if we can't be, the other options unfold according to our limitations.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of this. I like it the way it's written now. And I point out that, I still think it's a privilege if we do have the opportunity to dial in electronically because circumstances warrant. But it's not that often that it's going to happen, to be honest. And we're only talking about noting when people leave the meeting, and does it mean we don't have quorum anymore? So leaving it the way it's written doesn't put a lot of risk. It's not going to do it. And the sort of, to me, the flip side is, if people are, distracted and busy doing other things and just trying to pop back on so they're there for the vote, but not really for the rest of the meeting, I'm not sure that's the appropriate approach either. So I'm comfortable with leaving it the way it is. If your video goes off or you turn it off, and then you're considered out of the meeting. And again, certainly on this council, we've had pretty stellar attendance. That I don't know that we've ever gone below quorum, and probably never even gone to the point where if one person's video went out, we're below quorum. So I'm not in favor of these changes.
Councillor Kobayashi.
I just have a question. I believe we had one meeting via telephone and we voted. So what's the difference? It's just a point I want to make.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to let you know that this is incorporated into a council policy, and we've done it this way because it will make it easier if, once you've gone through doing hybrid meetings and dealing with electronic meetings for some time, you might want to make some changes. It's a little easier to revise a policy than it is to revise the bylaw. So we have actually within the policy that it's about participating via video, telephone conference as well. So it references that as well. So if you cannot be seen or you cannot be heard, you are not considered to be at the meeting. So I don't know if that helps. We could either reword this one, if that works for council, to change it that at video and audio at any time, just adding the words audio.
Okay. We do have a motion on the floor right now. Councillor Councillor Kobayashi, you still have the mic.
Yes, I do. Just a clarification, Marcy. So teleconferences were not visible, right? When we conduct city business. So what's the difference? I'm just trying to understand this.
Teleconference is just audio only, not through electronic means. So example, what Councillor Day brought up, you have some kind of an urgent thing. Maybe you're over at a conference or something and you have to all get together and you can't meet in person. So you're going to do it by audio conference, just audio, not Zoom.
Okay.
And we used to have that set up in here previously where we've had audio conference where some members of council couldn't attend, and we've done it through a conference phone system.
So just logically, I'm just sorry, I'm just having all kinds of problems with this because the whole purpose of it is to do the business of the city, correct?
Correct.
And regardless if it's on video or it's teleconference, it's hybrids, we're all on the phone, we're there, we're present, we're speaking. So I just don't understand why we have to change the, have something different for each case. I just don't understand this. We're still conducting the business of the city.
We've had issues in the past at other committee meetings where we're in the middle of dealing with business and we look and we see that people have left the meeting without letting us know. And then we realize, oh, we don't have a quorum now because they've actually left the meeting. So that hasn't happened at a council or committee meeting, but that was what we were trying to address to ensure that we have quorum.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Yes.
Just before I go to Councillor Day too, I think we do need to appreciate that there's sort of an advancement of technology as well. I mean, I have been on a conference call and I've dropped. And I have no idea at what point does the meeting know that I've dropped, right? Because they're all talking and they don't know that my phone's dropped. And I think, just the way technology is nowadays, I think everybody has access to a camera and it would be very strange. But anyways, Councillor Day.
Thank
And then
you.
Baxter.
I just wanted to propose an amendment to include the audio as an option in our bylaw. It seems like I'm hearing a number of people heading in this direction. So I'd like to just make sure if we're enshrining what I think is a little bit shaky wording myself in a bylaw, the better way would be to leave the bylaw silent and put it in the policy as the corporate officer just suggested. But if council wants it in the bylaw, then let's make it as broad as possible so that we're not locked into a particular type. And my reasoning is very simple. It's that I don't live very far away and I have a very hard time maintaining a stable internet connection when we're on Zoom. So I was turning off my video to try to stop it from locking up. So if that makes it impossible to participate, that makes it very difficult, and perhaps I would have to choose a different way to participate then, if it's so prescriptive that I have to be on video in order to participate in the council meeting, I would like another option so that I'm not locked out of the meeting. So if we're no longer visible or cannot be confirmed in attendance, so I just want to, where it says visible, I would like it to say visible or heard.
Yeah, so can I actually have staff please put up the motion that Councillor Jansen has moved, and then we can do the amendment?
Your worship?
Yeah.
Just for clarity, the amendments are to the policy and not the bylaw. And just for clarity, the policy as it reads currently, meeting participants shall use their best efforts to connect to the meeting via online video or telephone. And then the rules specific to video talk about if your video drops out, you shall be considered absent. But the current policy as written that we're seeking your approval on and potentially amendment thereof allows for audio only.
But I do not believe that that's what Councillor Jansen's motion was. Councillor Jansen's motion was that you needed to have your camera on for the vote. And if you were teleconferencing, you would not have a camera to turn on to vote.
It's revised and on the screen, Mayor.
So is 8 what Councillor Jansen moved? Okay. Councillor Jansen says not quite. It still needs to be amended.
So I'm proposing the amendment is no longer visible or cannot be heard.
So staff, can you please put that on red in the motion?
Sorry, Your Worship.
Yeah.
I believe section 8 in the current policy as written is only referring to electronic participating members who are participating via video. If an electronic member was participating by audio, this section would not apply to them.
Okay.
That would be how I would interpret this policy.
Okay, I think that makes the amendment a moot point. Forget that.
All right, so we're going to drop the amendment. There you go. All right, so I'm going to bring it back to the main motion then. The main motion that has been moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Baxter, is that if a member is no longer visible or turns off their video during a vote, they will be considered absent from the meeting, potentially resulting in the loss of a quorum. Councillor Jansen, is that correct?
Well, it is, but if we're going to accept a vote from an audio call, then why does the video person have to turn their video on? So at this point, Your Worship, this is getting confusing. I'd like to withdraw my motion. I'm not sure who the seconder was.
Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baxter agrees. So the motion has been, so I'm still looking for options. Are we saying that we do not wish to, Councillor Parkinson, go ahead.
I'll move option 1, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Councillor, that no changes be made to the draft policy. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call the question. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Is seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. I don't see any other discussion, so I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Yeah, we could have. Okay. That is it for me, Council. Is there any other amendments before I bring it to the main motion? If not, I'm going to bring us back to the main motion. The main motion is that Council Procedural Bylaw number 1890/2021 be forwarded to Council for consider. Oh, no, that's not it, because that's a committee of the whole. There it is. Okay, there you go. It's in front of us, all of us. Someone wish to move that?
I'm moving that.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. All right, moving on. We are now in new business, rezoning 8.1, rezoning 21-005-791 Drummond Way. Staff. Does staff wish to make a comment before I go to the motion?
Yes, Mayor Martin, Yasmin Hernandez will be there in just 1 second. Yasmin?
Hi, Mayor Martin. We have the applicants in attendance as well as the staff to answer any questions that you may have. The applicants have made a submission, a letter, and additional reporting available to council, and they would like to make a brief presentation to walk you through their submission. If you allow me to share my screen, I will share with you some visuals that the applicant would like to speak to directly.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you very much for allowing us to address yourselves tonight to talk about our Drummond Road project. It's important that we have an opportunity because there's been a lot of work done in consultation with the staff. There were a lot of questions raised at the Committee of the Whole meeting, and with the deferral motion on the floor, we weren't able to provide some clarity and some answers based on the work that's been done to date. And we'd just briefly like to be able to talk about 4 or 5 of the infrastructure questions that came up, and just a couple of important comments around the grading and the site adaptive planning principles. That's the information that we took from the meeting, and very briefly, we'd like to just address those. And in order to talk about the infrastructure, I'm going to ask our senior project engineer, Peter Ferguson, to come up and just provide some clarity around some of the comments and questions. And then around grading and site adaptive principles, our lead project architect, Justin Gammon. We'll just take about 10 minutes of your time. We'll be brief, but I think it's really important that we get an opportunity to share this information with council, which I hope will help inform decisions moving forward with this project. So with that, I'm going to ask Peter Ferguson to come forward.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Peter Ferguson. I'm with McElhaney Consulting, and wanted to clarify some of the questions that were raised at the last meeting. I'll start off with the question regarding the flows for fire protection, fire underwriter survey, or FUS. What we did in our design was we made sure that we satisfied the CRD requirements. This means that we were able to get flows through the development at a velocity less than 3.5 meters per second, and we're able to achieve 80 liters per second with that type of approach. The upper units, which are on the far right on the slide, are at the highest elevation. When we did our evaluation on that, we found that we were able to achieve 20 PSI at that high elevation. Again, that is in compliance with the requirements of CRD. In some of the units, we will be putting firewalls between them so that the fire zones, again, will make us in compliance with the FUS calculation. In summary, we are able to be in compliance with the FUS requirements for fire protection. The next question that came up regarded the access for the fire truck. The slide that you see up on the screen now actually does show the routing for the fire truck. And we did use the Colwood's fire truck, which is a tower truck 57, 12.8 meters long. And in doing this, we put in, and you'll see some hatched areas on that slide. There's 3 of them. Those represent staging areas, which is a requirement of the fire chief, so that the fire truck can sit on a milder grade for firefighting. So this was approved by the Colwood Fire Department. And in doing this, we enhanced the movement in such a way that typically it's a 6 meter wide road. That's the minimum width. We actually are making it a 7 meter wide road, have a little easier for the fire truck to maneuver in here. So again, we've satisfied the requirements for the fire truck. A comment came up about the traffic report and the impact of traffic from the proposed development. The Watt report notes that there'll be no drop in existing level of service along Cecil Blogg Drive. Again, they also state that there's no mitigation required at the intersections at either Veteran Memorial or Jacqueline. Drummond has the capacity as they have stated in their report, for the increased traffic flow from this development. In other words, we're satisfying the requirements of the traffic impact analysis. A question came up about stormwater management. With the Colwood bylaw 285, we are in compliance with the requirements of this bylaw. And also, interestingly enough, the Colwood requires that the IDF curve be increased by 25% to allow for climate change. We have allowed for this in our design. In our design, we are having with the stormwater management, zero increase in runoff from the site. All conveyances will be able to handle a 1 in 10 year storm. And the way we're going to have zero runoff is by using rain gardens and stormwater detention. The stormwater will discharge to ditches that exist on Drummond, on the south side of Drummond, and they will discharge to the east and west of the project site. We heard a comment about the sanitary flows. The discharge from the sanitaries will go down through Braveheart. That pipe does have the capacity to accept the flow from the proposed development. In other words, we're in compliance with the discharge of the sanitary flows from the site. So with regard to fire protection, fire truck, traffic, stormwater management, and sanitary, we are in compliance. I'd like to turn the next part of the discussion over to our architect, Justin Gammon.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to provide some clarification on some of the questions that came up. If we can advance, to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to provide some clarification around the site grading, and in particular how our explorations with site adaptive planning informed and really dictated how that was manifest. It really starts with a compaction of the development. So the site, as you know, is currently zoned for single-family residences, which has a certain density and a certain distribution across the site, essentially filling it from top to bottom. What we proposed and are proposing is a townhouse typology, which is consistent with the OCP and the Colwood's Housing Needs Report provided earlier. By clustering the townhouses and their naturally compact base, we reduce the footprint, and we are allowing more of the site to remain undisturbed. By consolidating all of the development on the lower or southern portion of the site, we are actually able to leave the entire top third, or actually 40% of the site, completely undisturbed. So that would be protected green space, part of which could be a park, as staff has announced, and part of it would be a dedicated green space within the strata. We note that the most sensitive ecological areas would be included in that. So that would be the two large bluffs at the the southern upper portion of the site, and the spectacular ridge that runs along the eastern property line with the arbutus grove that's there. Reflecting on the alternative as a single family, that would have a higher density, 0.4 to 1 compared with the 0.3 to 1 that's being proposed with this. And more importantly, would only provide 5% dedicated green space compared with the 40% through the townhouse development. And that space that would be left, or the majority then of the site, would either be under development through driveways and access road, or it would be at the very least in private title. With regard to the road, as you can see on the site, the slide that we've got here that we talked to briefly on a committee of the whole, you can see that the allocation of the road and the grading in particular follows a natural contour. So in this slide, you see the red indicating the areas of the steepest slope. And you can see how the road has been worked to wind its way to the best of abilities to meet all of the other competing requirements for fire access and navigation and access to the individual units. But the road has really manifested itself in that. If I can have the next slide, please. This is taken from the package, the application package, and it is the architectural site plan. I'm going to talk just really briefly to this, but what it does is it provides a general approach to the site grading, and you can see graphically here in the site sections in that lower right-hand corner how the site actually, thank you for jumping forwards to that. This is just a detail of that previous page. I just wanted to give you the context of where it was coming from. So what you can see clearly here, these are two sections, one taken, the one at the bottom is taken towards the entry, and you can see the lower level of the wetlands. The dashed heavy red line shows the existing grade. So that's the existing topography of the site. The upper slide is about halfway through the site and shows the termination of the road at the upper level. What I wanted to really be able to show you here is, we've talked a lot about this in plan and showing the overlapping of the ecological reports and the development itself. And I think that this slide, which was included in the package but wasn't part of our presentation last week, really tells that critical missing piece of the story, which shows how we have worked to really follow to the best of our abilities with all of the other competing elements to minimize the amount of blasting, to minimize the amount of cut and fill that would be required to make this project work. One of the things that I think is most telling, perhaps, in terms of whether or not we succeeded in this is that there is no retaining wall higher than 1.2 meters in the entire project. So in consideration of this clarifying information, we would ask that Council reconsider the October 18th Committee of the Whole resolution and move forwards with the proposed amendments to the land use bylaw with consideration of first and second readings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will look to Council. Motions. Councillor Parkinson.
I guess.
Yeah, Councillor Perkins. Sorry, just before you do, Councillor Perkins, could you just turn off the mic there? Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So I was the one last week who moved the motion to defer. I'd like to thank the consultants for coming out. I'm sure they wouldn't have missed that riveting discussion on the procedural bylaw for anything. I will confess for council, Peter Ferguson's a very good friend of mine. We don't see each other much anymore, but there was a time in our lives where we spent a lot of time and had a lot of good times together. So it's good to see Peter again tonight, but I don't think that puts me in any kind of conflict. They came out and addressed a number of questions, and I guess I feel guilty. Perhaps some of them were from my comments, and I do tend to yap a bit too much at times. I don't at all want to question. I mean, the owners of this property have assembled a crackerjack team of consultants who have done a great job and have addressed a whole bunch of things. And our staff have obviously worked with them and massaged and come up with probably as good a project as you could put on that land. Here's my concerns. I would like to see council put the same level of thought and commitment into this site as the consultants and our staff does. I think we have a role to play here. And our role is firstly twofold. One is the site adaptive planning, and what does it mean? Because frankly, it's a sort of a fungible concept that means different things on different projects. We've discussed around here about while this tree or that tree and site adaptive planning or just rock bluff and moving houses and we've done that. And this site what we said, and is that they've proposed to give some very nice land for parks and some lookouts and fencing, which is generous and appreciated. But then they're into a lot of cutting and filling and disturbance of the remainder of the site. And they've done a sensitive job of putting what they want to put on there in the way they've done it. But as a council, if we look at all the properties along this area, call it, I don't know what you want to call the Drummond slopes or whatever, they all have similar topography. And they'll all need in some amount of shaping of the site to fit whatever projects go in there. And I suspect they will be along the lines of this. I don't think we'll see a lot of single family, be more townhouses, perhaps some condos to better suit the land. So we have to be, what we say is okay here, frankly, starts out as the starting point on the next person that comes in. So let's look at it and think of it. And it may very well be that that's the best that can be done on these sites, and I'm not arguing that, but I think we should, as a council, recognize what we're saying and why we're saying it, and put the same level of thought in it. The other concern that I've raised that I think council needs to consider and think about is, there's a number of properties along this slope, and this property is centrally located. So once it develops, it precludes a bunch of other options along there. And these options may be very difficult to achieve because there's different landowners in different places. But as a council, shouldn't we look at, is this the best that can be done in that area? And I'm not even saying it's not. I'm just saying that as a council, we should make that as an informed decision and not just a knee-jerk reaction because it's nice to be bold and approve projects that are, that they've got this level of detail put into them. So that was my thinking behind the deferral motions, and I guess I stand behind those. I'll make that motion again, Your Worship.
All right. So we have a deferral motion. Do I have a seconder to that? Seconded. There's no discussion. When are you deferring to, Councillor Jansen, or excuse me, Councillor Parkinson? And to where?
I was deferring until staff had time to present the information that we would need to have a fulsome discussion on those two issues. And I didn't want to pin staff down to a time because I know they're busy.
And where do you anticipate for this to come back to?
I guess we'll come back.
Committee of the whole or council? Sure,
a couple committee of the whole. I don't know.
Okay. Staff, do you want to make a recommendation on time on the motion that Councillor Parkinson has moved in regards to the request that he has within his within that motion, which was, I believe, 2 reports. Was it not?
Through the mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're prepared to address any questions that they have tonight, and a slide is available so we can look at the contours, the roads, the access routes, and discuss.
Sorry, Mr. Molnar, we're in a deferral motion. So the question is, in the deferral motion, we are looking for a time period of when staff would be able to bring this back to committee of the whole.
We are prepared tonight, so it can be available at the next committee meeting.
So just as a clarification, the reports that are being requested through this deferral motion are available presently?
I haven't heard any report that has been requested. We've been asked for information about access and roads, and we're prepared to discuss those tonight.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read the motion that I have, which is the recommendation from the 2021 October 18th Committee of the Whole meeting, that the rezoning application of 21-005 for 791 Drummond Way be deferred pending 2 reports from staff as following: site grading and site adaptive planning principles related to grading of the development portions of the site, and 2 development options of the hillside properties on both the east and west of the site.
Thank you very much for that clarity. So you may find that the site adaptive, there's no new information that we will be able to bring. And we're prepared to address the other access issues and the developing opportunities for those lands in this meeting. If council wishes, no deferral may be necessary.
Okay, so I would say that I would suggest then that council, the motion would read that the next committee, the whole meeting, from a date standpoint. So no other discussion. I will call the question. Those in opposition of the motion. Councillor Logan, Councillor Jansen, Mayor Martin, Councillor Kobayashi, Councillor Baxter oppose. So that motion fails. So that brings us back to this. Do I have a motion from, Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be prepared to move the motion that was in the staff report last week.
Thank you. And so, Council, I brought that up. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but it's basically that the Committee of the Whole recommends consideration of the recommendations of the Council, that the appropriate amendments to land use bylaw be prepared to rezone 791 Drummond Way, and that the amenity bylaw include a $2,500 payment per dwelling to the community amenity fund, and so on. Does anyone on council wish to have that motion put on screen? Because I could ask staff to put that on screen. Just raise your hand if you would. Yes. Okay. Staff, could you please put that motion on screen? And then while you're doing that, I will go to discussion. Excuse me. I had a mover. Did I have a seconder to that motion? Moved by Councillor Day. I saw your hand up, Day. Excuse me, Councillor Day. Councillor Baxter, you have the mic.
Thank you. I support going ahead with the original motion that was at the Committee of the Whole, because I've now had a chance to visit the site, and I have studied it to my satisfaction at least. To me, the one salient fact in this is that the land is currently zoned for single family dwellings. And I've seen this over and over again throughout my career, that if you develop it for single family dwellings, you do a lot more damage to the site than if you go to what you might call densification that produces a smaller footprint, and then you leave the rest park. And the point's been made that with a single family dwelling development, we would have 5% park. And with this, we have 40%, well, 33% park and 7% protected private space. I just think that's a much better option. Now, as to the subjects of the report, I believe that the site adaptive planning principles have been applied by people who really understand them, and I don't claim to. But more to the point, I think the results is what we look at. And I'm very pleased with the results. And as for the development options of the hillside properties on both east and west of the site, I'm perfectly satisfied with that, having looked at detailed contour maps and made some inspection of the site on foot. And so I'm going to support that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, if you could turn off your mic, that'll, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I would like to hear from staff on what they prepared specifically about the issues for the neighboring properties, because one of my big concerns is that we look at one small thing and don't broaden our scope to look at the bigger picture. So I believe that our staff just said they had considered our request from the previous meeting and that they had something to share with us. And I would really like to hear that.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, no problem at all. Yasmin, would you mind pulling up that contour map? Thank you, Yasmin. If you can make it just as large as you can. Excellent. So Yasmin, I may ask you to zoom in just a little bit around the blue box. That's exactly right. So This is a map that's available. It's on CRD intramapping, and the contour referencing that you see there is boldest in the solid even or 5 meter contour grids, and you've got 1 meter grids in and around it. So you can see that the site is quite steep. Site adaptive design principles as presented by the team that's working for the consultants or as the consultants on the project have shown you that grade as it reflects on the land. So I'm going to translate more to the land surrounding this project site. First off, what we'll speak to is Drummond Way and St. Barbara. If we keep our reference point, the north is the top of the screen image that you see. South is obviously the bottom by Zapata, and then east and west relevant to that. Drummond Way will eventually extend as it's sitting now through not this parcel and not the next property to it, but the next property along, following that roughly that bold yellow contour line, which almost runs directly into St. Barbara's Place. It's not intended that the city acquire land for the purpose. The road will be extended naturally as a course of development. You see there's a minor influence on the bottom end of Drummond Park as it's existingly formed, but ultimately Drummond Way will follow that contour and connect into St. Barbara Place. That will allow opportunities for development on either side for the developers, but not to presuppose a council consideration. Staff looked at it for the matrix of what the official community plan presently enables, which is the hillside designation, which would allow for single family up to multifamily like this, and even include condominiums in select areas. So Drummond Way will extend and connect eventually to St. Barbara's Place, providing a connection down to Fulton Road. And Fulton Road then almost is intersected by St. Barbara's and Hyde on the other side, which will provide a connection down to Veterans Memorial Parkway. So that will be both vehicular, pedestrian, and bike route as per a local road standard as per the transportation master plan. Staff have as well considered about access points for trail connectivity. Yasmin, would you mind just zooming in just a hair more, please? Thank you, that's perfect. And then just slide it up a little bit. There we go. So off of the words where it literally says Zapata Place, right where the place part is, there's a narrow right of way that's not quite wide enough for a road and not quite wide enough for a strata driveway. This was created many, many years ago and was a primary access point for a driveway to recognize the top portion of the land, or alternately for a minor access point for parks vehicles and maintenance vehicles if that area should ever become park. One of the staff's consideration when this applicant came in is that portion, the upper portion of that hill slope, as it translated to the properties to the west and east, as mirrored against the environmental considerations from the studies that have been put forward. There is high value environmental area as well as steep slope considerations, which would make carving a road network or carving lots or single family creation into that area quite challenging. And it is quite environmentally beneficial to the area and the slope. So that lands as park. If council wished, could it be extended either west when the property developed to the west to those viewpoints and hill nubs that you see outlined by the contours as referenced, and also to the east? So that park area could actually be contiguous. And the intention of this development is to create a maintenance vehicle loading spot off of Zapata Place, as well as park access off of that road there for pedestrians, and then to build an east-west connection that follows the contours and is respective of grades. That will define how the pedestrian uses the environmentally sensitive area, hopefully keeping to the trails so that the footfall of the users are best managed. And then, as I indicated, that park area could be extended to the west and to the east with future land use considerations that may come forward to council. But as council outlined, they're not before us today, and they're likely to come in one at a time. So building a plan for connectivity, recreational enjoyment from the land, as well as park continuity helps, maybe suggested to help not just the view spectrum of those properties, but also the transport of animals and all of that in their natural habitat. Coming back to the trail system that will extend off Zapata and then travel east-west, as noted in your report, there's also an intent to take that trail system through the lands to connect right from Zapata to Drummond Way. This provides an important connection to the Drummond Park that exists and is only accessed off Drummond Way. We believe that the community may find it a valuable link but time will frankly tell. It's intended right now that that trail gets started through the park areas proposed, enter the lands, and then use portions of the road system of the developing lands, and then come out at the bottom of Drummond Way through some of the images that the developer team presented the other day. In terms of land use and function, you've heard me mention that all these lands are considered hillside, but ultimately all our zones are one, so they may necessitate a council consideration for everything other than single family. And due to the slope and the grades of the land, the amount of retention that would be necessary to hold the municipal road in that area would create significant cuts on the high side of the road and significant fills on the low side of the road, necessitating retaining walls in any development scenario. So we were really pleased this developer heard that obstacle and found a unique way to cluster the homes in a way that single family could not be clustered to mitigate some of those grade differences, while also using portions of the foundations to bring daylight to the living spaces while still viewpoints to the residents that may be choosing to live there in the future. So we did look at the connectability of an internal road network, and that was right at the start of this project. Whenever a developer proposes strata, the city firstly looks at, is this best strata, or would it be better served as a public road system? So public roads are wider, and you've heard me talk about the fact that cutting into that slope would cause significant land alteration, significant retention, as well as continue that retention and retaining wall needs into the single family lands and lot, especially while they were trying to mitigate stormwater flows and tie the relationship of lands together. Due to that, an east-west connection to run the contours, it wasn't appropriate to take a north-south connection at a 15 to 20 meter right-of-way through the land, because the amount of resultant area for the cost wasn't necessarily there for that to become under municipal ownership. So when we look to the land to the west, municipal access from this developing property is not beneficial because it points into that nub of land and those beautiful viewpoint properties. That land and slope is well fronted by Drummond Way, also other roads in the neighborhood like Sedgwick Drive, where access points can be far more reasonably met and obtained, and more sensitivity to the hillside provided. When we look to the land to the east of the developing property, the one that's already created 3 single family dwelling units out at the bottom, there's actually road to create there's space to create over 20 meter road access, which is more than enough for a public road from that point as well. Again, necessity for site adaptive design would need to come in. And we'd probably look as well for a clustering intent and a minor road standard, which can be achieved in the strata form, to be able to get that with the highest sensitivity as possible. It is not recommended that one strata join another strata unless they're in a relationship together at the very beginning, when the land is formed and a proper apportionment of the asset can be fettered out. So in that end, we ended up considering the access and the development potential of the properties to the west, the park's continuity to the property to the west as well as the east, as well as the access considerations of the park property to the east, the continuity of the Drummond Way road system to Fulton Road. And we've also looked at a potential pedestrian connection to the north, which would tie into the road opposite Souk Road. Can't quite read that name, but that would need to be determined when that property came forward, which is 3 properties away from this property site. That point as a pedestrian route to the north is best achieved perhaps in that property where the grades are less and less severe. I'm more than happy to outline or go over any other factor that council wishes that I have not covered tonight, but I don't want to bore you with the whole whack of details that you may not be seeking. Thank you. Thank you, Yasmin. Leave the map up until council may have other questions resolved. Oh, we can pull it back. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm surprised, actually, in some ways about the viability of Drummond, because I've known it kind of as dead ending into a park. So that is new information for me, and I thank you very much for that. And in terms of the site adaptive plan, I don't think I've seen any development come forward with quite as thorough a review. I really appreciate the additional width on the road for the fire trucks. I've been watching that with interest for a long time. I think it makes a much better development with the wider road for various reasons, but it to me is commendable. But the results of the effectiveness of your site adaptive planning won't be known for probably 10 or 15 years when we find out whether or not, you know, the areas that you are saving are actually functioning as they would have done it in the past, if the animals can live there and if humans aren't destroying every bit of moss that grows on a rock. But with that said, it is a noble effort. And I think that the issue is going to be how well can you plan for the future use of the remaining parts, because there is, you know, there is a huge amount that you're saving and gifting to the future as a natural area of something like 40% of your site being open space. But we don't know if there are sufficient protections built into your strata to compensate for all the rocky outcrops that are being lost as well. So I just recognize that it's a very good attempt, and I will be watching to see how well it turns out. But there is a lot to be proud of there. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I felt that I should provide some clarity on some of my thoughts. I was one that supported the deferral last week, and I have changed my mind this week. And I think the most instructive part, the learning curve this week was when Councillor Parkinson and I chose on Sunday afternoon to go walk this property. We walked it. We almost gave up trying to find a way to get into it from Drummond, but I'm glad that we did, because we were thinking we would just drive around and hit Zapata, but we forced ourselves through the invasives, what have you, at the roadside, and we punched up the left side. We followed the ticker tape parade there all the way up to the top and across. I believe, and this is something I put the filter on a little bit when we get these park dedications, that sometimes I believe that they meet the needs of the developer more so than the needs of the community. So my hat goes off, and I'm doing a mea culpa here, because I do believe that piece of property at the top is worth saving every bit of it. I believe that it has a significant value to us as a community. And I sat with Mr. Molnar this afternoon, and I thank him for some of his explanation and the aspirational his aspiration to spread that park dedication left and right, east and west, I think is a net benefit to the community. And I know, we know from the Parks Master Plan that we are in a deficit on Triangle Mountain as far as parks dedication, whether they be natural parks or urban parks, what have you. So that was instructive. Now, I do have some questions, Mr. Mayor, and I believe these are probably best with the proponent. In no particular order, and I don't even know which one might want to speak to it. We just to expand a little bit on my story, we heard some people rooting around above us, and we're at the bottom of the rocky outcropping at the top of the property. And we look up and we found Councillor Baxter doing the same thing, walking down from Zapata with some members of Scenic and his spouse, and we took great delight in sort of forming up as an informal group. And amongst this group were some members of the public, and I thought that was delightful. There were some concerns from the public, and I think a lot of those have been addressed. One very interesting one came to me, and Councillor Parkinson and I noticed tree number 1173. Go ahead, put up your hand, whoever knows this tree. But anyways, I will explain it. It was brought to our attention that that tree over there, which is the bold one on the top there, the eagle perch tree, was something that resonated with the public because they could watch the wildlife do their thing there. Obviously, probably hunting rabbits, hopefully from Royal Bay, but I do believe there's value in trying to save that tree. And I believe that Councillor Parkinson did look it up on your master list of trees, which is quite voluminous. And it is a question mark. So what I'm here to suggest is that it would resonate with our community and certain members that live up the hill if we could see fit to doing what we can to save that particular tree. No other trees were mentioned to me, just that one. So I hope that that resonates with you as a development group. And I understand it's kind of dead at the top, so I'm no arborist. But you know, if you maybe took some off the top but left a perch, and maybe we expanded on some kind of there's all sorts of designs for eagle perches or stuff like that on the top, even to encourage some nesting or something like that. I believe that the community would love that. I guess that's rhetorical. We won't I won't force you to an answer unless you have one at hand. I do believe I know it's called Greenfield. We've referred to it as Greenfield. I walked up the middle, or we had a good look at the middle. It's clearly full of invasives and other scrub trees. Yes, there's the occasional fir tree, which breaks my heart, but I do believe that the portions that are worth saving are consistent with your design, and that is the setbacks on the east and west side of the property and the hilly portion at the top of the property. So I find myself in agreement with that sort of design. And I do believe that, there's all sorts of evidence of the trees being harvested, and I did find a couple of the shovel holes that were mentioned. So clearly, it was a road or something coming up there. So I get that. I find myself more comfortable as I walked it and saw this for myself, and I truly do believe that the portions we're saving are outlined in the proposal. The connectivity. I love the connectivity east and west as far as what Mr. Molnar is thinking, and the entryway from Zapata. I think that's will be greatly appreciated. These members of the community did indicate this is a well-used area for youth and people walking dogs and people just generally doing nature walks. So the more we can encourage that would be great. I understand the road connectivity better now from Mr. Molnar. Some of the blasting, I get there will be some blasting. We have developments in our community that are working with rocky outcroppings and incorporating those into their design. So where one townhome maybe sits on top of a rocky outcropping, or maybe there's a slightly different height between the neighboring one. I'm not sure if that's even possible. To clarify, I have an arts degree. I'm not an engineer. So I rely on people like Councillor Parkinson and Councillor Baxter and Councillor Kobayashi, our bevy of engineering specialists. The one I am pleased to hear about the thought that's been put into the fire suppression. I know that's a requirement. Can I seek some clarity? I believe that the gentleman said that there was 20 PSI was what the expectation was at the top of the property. Is that correct? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to step up and use the microphone so it comes up on the recording.
Yeah, it's Peter Ferguson again. Yeah, that's correct. 20 PSI is a requirement for fire protection, and we do achieve that pressure at the very top end of the site.
It seems really low. I mean, household tap pressure is like 40 PSI.
It is.
So,
You're correct with that statement.
so what you're saying is we far surpass the minimum requirement of 20 PSI.
Yeah, what we have is the volume of flow up there. The demand up there, excuse me, is for 66 liters per second. We can deliver 80,
okay,
and we need to make sure we deliver it at a pressure in the main of 20 PSI or more. And we achieve the 20 PSI there.
So we're meeting the required standards or exceeding them. Is that what I'm hearing?
We are.
And I'm I think it's great that you guys have used the barometer of the ladder truck, which is our largest piece of apparatus that clearly gives us an aerial attack option if there is suppression that's required, midway up the hill. So I love all that. So those are some of my reasons, Your Worship. I will turn my mic off now and carry on, but I will be supporting this, and I like what I see. The trail. One other last thought about the trail. The more I think it's awkward to invite a family of 4 with bikes and skateboards and what have you to walk up the roadway. I wouldn't be comfortable with that with my boys when they were young. But I do see on the diagram that it dips off the road for some parts and then it maybe crosses to the other side. So the more we can make that a dedicated, committed pathway for our community to transit through the property. Because A, I'm not sure the residents would love herds of kids marching up the roadway. And B, I'm not sure I would be comfortable with that if I had a handful of young ones. So those are some of my thoughts. And I thank you for the few minutes, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councilor Logan. Thank you, Worship. And perhaps this was a useful exercise, but and I appreciate the additional information that staff and the applicant has provided. I think my friend down at the end of the table, Councillor Baxter, articulated it well as to why this works. And I wasn't in favor of the deferral last week because I think this checks all the boxes, frankly, and staff did a very good job in articulating why. And I'm not sure that we recognize the impact that we had on staff and the applicant when we decided to deferral. I guess what I was surprised about is, we hold up the OCP as a document, and then and we had all these OCP provisions met, and then we still weren't comfortable. So in other words, we can't suck and blow. We have an OCP and we have provisions in the OCP that are met. So there should be a reasonable expectation that after staff and the applicant have done a lot of work to get it to this table, that it would be supported. And I recognize, and I'm not sure that we appreciated the amount of work that went into this particular application, as with all applications. So I do think this particular application does set a standard. I mean, the level of detail is something that I haven't seen a lot of, frankly. So I appreciated this. And it really does set a standard. It sets the bar to meet or beat, frankly, not only in this area, but other areas. So I appreciated that, and I appreciated the comments tonight. And I do believe this is right. As I said last time, it was highlighted that this type of housing is a type of housing that is dearly missing in the Capital Regional District and is sought after. And so this is a good step forward. So I appreciate it. And that's another reason why I decided to move the motion tonight, Your Worship. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi. Thank you very much, Your Worship. I too was one of the ones that had voted in favor of deferment. But actually, it's interesting. 1 week more just to look at this whole thing made me change my mind. So where I'm going to support this now. I did get the opportunity again. That the first time I went and looked at your site, I just looked at the elevation. I went, oh, mackerel, and I think I was saying last week that I thought 60 feet. These guys are dreaming. This is not 60 feet; it was 60 meters. But I in fact was an idiot. I went out again today, found that pathway up the left-hand side, and then as soon as I got to the top, it just started pouring on me. But anyways, it was a wet adventure, but it really gave me a much better insight into this. And I mean, I live in a similar type of situation as Strata, a gated community here in Colwood, and this looks like it's much better planned than what I live in. And it's sort of similar to some things I've seen in Saanich. When I was running federally, I got to walk these townhomes up on the hills. And so, I think you have checked all of the check marks. And, I mean, as of last week, I didn't even know what site adaptive planning was, and got educated a little bit. And it's really still not a science, though. And you guys have the expertise. I certainly do not. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm an aeronautical engineer, in fact. So, but I mean, with all due respect, I think you've responded to all the things that were sort of bugging me as concerns. But the only thing that I had asked Councillor Baxter's after this evening was, I still didn't, I was still kind of concerned about one thing, but it's certainly not my area of expertise, and that is, how the stormwater was being handled. I know it's the rain garden and the water detention. And that's how you're going to be able to. So, I mean, I'm not into that detail, and I just sort of said, well, that's not my bailiwick anyway. But I don't say this too often, but I actually give you kudos, because I think you really did pay attention to the OCP. And I think what you have is, I couldn't think of a better solution. I looked at that and I went, see what they're doing here. I actually understood what you were trying to do here. So my hat's off to you. And then I am going to support the rezoning application, go to first and second reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. So staff, could you please put up the motion again, please? Then I'm gonna call the vote on. Or not. Does council need the motion? Oh, there it is. Okay. So that is the motion that is before us. I don't see any other discussion, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 8.2. This is developmental variance permit for 3470 Vantage Point. This was discussed at the October 18th committee meeting. Can I get a recommendation, please? Or a motion? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Jansen. My apologies, Councillor Jansen. I didn't see your light. Is there a discussion? Councillor Day. Councillor Day, you know what? Could you just give us 2 seconds? We'll let these people leave and then. Thank you all. Councillor Day. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I will not be supporting this because we are doubling the height of the retaining walls, which we were trying to avoid because of the negative characteristics of tall walls.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to 8.3, this is developmental variance permit for 650 Allandale Road. This is a recommendation motion from the October 18th committee of the whole meeting. Councillor Parkins, excuse me, Councillor Jansen. I'll get the light on. Thank you.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson, are you seconding?
Yeah.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Councillor Day opposes. The motion passes. 8.4, I am going to hand off to my acting mayor, Councillor Jansen, and as I am declaring a conflict of interest in that this development is in proximity of my home.
And thank you, Your Worship. So 8.4, development variance permit for 3131 and 315 Havenwood Lane. Any recommendations? Councillor Logan, are you? Councillor Baxter, are you moving that? Thank you. And Councillor Logan for a second. Any discussion? And all those opposed? And thank you for that. That passes. Thank you, Mark.
I'm going to declare conflict. It's in my vicinity also, so I'll step out for the same reason.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi's conflict of interest been declared, correct? Yeah, okay, thank you. So moving on to 8.5, this is the developmental variance permit for 571 Bezanton Way. There's a recommendation from the October 18th Committee of the Whole meeting. Moved by Councillor Day, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 8.6, this is our Jenn Hepting, our Director of Finance, in regards to our Q3 financial update. Ms. Hepting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Do you see the slide deck before you?
We can. We do see your. We see preview, so it's not in a display mode.
Are we in display mode now?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, just turn on your mic and just say it here. Sorry, Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Kobayashi has a recommendation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Kobayashi.
Just, on the very bottom of that screen, Jen, there's that volume control, and right beside it, there's a little screen there. If you touch that little piton there, it'll blow it up.
Okay, thank you very much. I had it blown up, but I believe it was on my third screen that I didn't share. So just bear with me.
Yeah, I do see it.
Okay. Sorry about this. In the essence of time, I will speak to this without the slide deck. The slide deck was simply images from the package that is before you tonight. So staff have prepared a comprehensive Q3 financial update. And there was just a couple of key points that I did want to highlight, as well as just walk you through the recommendation that is before you. So similar with the Q2 financial update, this does include updated projections to year end. So we meet with each service area of the city. We review budgets, we review projected activity to take us through to the year end, and then we reflect that in the information that is provided before you. And as you can see, we are projecting an operating surplus this year. The primary driver for the change in the projected surplus over what we presented a couple of months ago is related to that of our federal PILT revenues. And I did want to take a moment and just comment on those. So specifically, we have collected almost $300,000 more in federal PILT revenue this year than we had budgeted. That being said, there is potential that some of that revenue is at risk. Simply put, I do not have more information than I did at the Q2 to share with you. So we are aware that there are a couple of properties that are under review. We have been informed that there may be the risk that we will have to repay some of the federal PILT that we have previously collected on those properties. And we have a rough estimate that the total revenue at risk is approximately $400,000. And so I wanted to highlight that, that while we have exceeded budget with those federal PILT revenues, there is a chance that some of that revenue may be returned. And so we have highlighted that within the Q3 update. And as we get more information, we will return to council and we will share the implications of that information with you. With respect to the city's operations, We have come in at approximately 96% of our core operating budget. The primary driver for coming in under budget is related to both staffing transitions and turnover. It's related to reduced spend on travel and training. And it's also related to some one-time savings on some of our benefit providers. So due to the lack of activity or benefit claims immediately following the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, we did realize some one-time savings on benefit costs this year. And so that too has helped generate part of that surplus. And another area that I did want to highlight, which is referred to in the staff recommendation. So this year, the CRD, they did return a portion of prior year requisitions that related to funding that was requisitioned from the city for trunk sewer capital purposes. And so we received a credit on this year's requisition, just shy of $140,000. And so staff, in this update, we have proposed that that amount be transferred to the city's sewer capital reserve fund, should council resolve that tonight. Should council not resolve that tonight, that returned funding would simply form part of our general operating surplus. The appendices to the report have provided detailed update on each of the city's service areas, the city's special initiatives, the city's capital spend, as well as the status of our COVID-19 Safe Restart grant spend. I'd be pleased to answer any specific questions. Otherwise, the third quarter is for information update, and there is a recommendation for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day, and then Kobayashi.
Thank you.
Sorry, your mic's on.
Oh, it's me now.
So sorry, you know what, we'll just do. Councillor Day.
All right, there we are. I'm just wondering for the CRD trunk sewer monies, was that not funded by all taxpayers?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, Councillor Day, that was funded by way of the CRD's general requisition for purposes of the trunk sewer capital. But yes, to answer your question, it was funded by all ratepayers.
So with that being the case, I will be requesting that that money be returned to all ratepayers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a quick question, Jen. If I just do the math here, you said we're getting an extra $300,000 in PILT, but at the same time, potentially we're at risk for $400,000 that we've been overpaid. So would it not be a smart idea just to hold off on making a decision on this $140,000 at this point in time until we know a little bit more? Just a question.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your question, Councillor Kobayashi. Two separate matters. So we have received return funding from the CRD of approximately $140,000. That funding was initially requisitioned for purposes of the CRD's trunk sewer reserves. A separate item, we have exceeded our federal PILT revenue collection this year. So when you look at our operating revenues, that is one of the primary drivers for why we are coming in over budget with respect to our operating revenues. For council consideration is the transfer of the returned CRD funding. Should council not wish to transfer that funding that was initially requisitioned for purposes of sewer capital to the city's sewer capital, that funding would simply form part of the general operating surplus. Should there be a risk that materializes with respect to the federal PILT revenues, that returned CRD funding could form part of the needed difference that we would need to fund the impact should we realize the need to return federal PILT that was previously collected. If we don't look at that returned CRD funding, I would be proposing that we look at general accumulated surplus. Today, we don't have sufficient information to understand the extent of that risk or whether or not it will actually materialize. I hope to have that for year end.
So it would be a prudent thing just to hold off then. Is that what you're saying to me, Jen?
Council could certainly hold off from making any recommendations on specific transfers to reserve, this one included, until year end when we see where things materialize and where we actually end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Just a question on the PILTs, Jen. My sense of PILTs is that it's always been the federal government sort of has a Ouija board and comes out and says, here's how much we're going to give you. So if they've overpaid, is that 100% their fault, or is the city somehow complicit in that?
That's an excellent question. The city is working very closely, city staff with the BC Assessment Authority, as well as with the federal Public Services Canada, to review the properties, the specific properties that they've highlighted. Over recent years, we have worked quite closely so that we can generate an expectation as to what we can collect. We establish our budgets and our submissions based on BC assessment information, assessed values. The federal government remits their payment based on federal assessed values. The majority of the time, those are in sync, but it is not. There have been exceptions, of which we have dealt with in the past, and this may be one of them. I don't have a direct answer to your question. I don't have enough information at this point.
Okay, no, that's fine. On Councillor Day's point, which I agree with, that if the money came from general revenue, it should go back to general revenue as opposed to specific to the sewers. Do we need a motion on that, or how do we deal with that?
It'll actually, so sorry, I'll step in, because it'll actually automatically be going back into general revenue unless council makes a motion this evening to direct it to to the capital reserve funds. So what will happen this evening is I will look for a motion. If I don't see a motion from anyone, then the $139,174 will go back into general revenue, but the discussion can come back at Q4 if council makes that decision that they wish to redirect that at that point. So saying that, I will look for any motions. Do I have any motions? Otherwise, I will thank our CFO and move on. I will thank our CFO. Thank you. So moving on then to bylaws. 9.1, bylaw number 1872-02, 5-year financial plan for 2021 to 2025. This is an amendment. This is for adoption. May I get a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Jansen. Is there any discussion? Councillor Day. And then, oh, excuse me, Councillor Parkinson. Sorry, you landed on that.
Just to be clear then, that the recommendation under 8.6 was that the 139,000 go into the trunk sewer, goes into the sewer capital reserve fund. But we're on 8.7, I believe, bylaws. I just want to know, or 9.1 bylaws. I believe we're on bylaws.
Yes, we're on bylaws.
So I just want to know, does the bylaw reflect the recommendation in 8.6 or not?
My understanding was this was just an amendment. We were just cleaning up something in the 5-year financial plan, but I'll look to our our CAO.
This bylaw is silent on that matter. They're unrelated.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
So I'm unclear on what the amendment is.
Staff?
Thank you through the chair. The amendment is the result of direction that staff received at the second quarter update. And it specifically referred to three expenditure items within the city's current financial plan. One of which, and sorry, I'm just looking to see if I can pull up. I don't know if staff are able to pull up. We had highlighted council's resolution when this bylaw was introduced at the last council agenda. But in any event, this bylaw looks to add an additional $15,000 capital expenditure budget for purposes of safety enhancement to the Latoria Creek stairs. This bylaw also looks to increase the city's traffic calming program budget. And lastly, this bylaw looks to increase funding in the amount of an additional $10,000 for purposes of the city's participation in the Clean BC rebate program. So these were items that were discussed during the second quarter update, and the bylaw, I believe, has received first 3 readings and is now before you for adoption tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That really helps.
Excuse me, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 9.2, this is bylaw number 1890, council procedural bylaw 2021. This is for first, second, and third reading. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Day. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Logan. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I got to call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. Motion passes.